CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the CGA Tour podcast, the Calvin Glen Alexander Tour podcast. Of course, tonight I'm rejoined here by the man, the legend himself. I would say the myth, but you're definitely not a myth. So I wouldn't do the
I don't know that I'm a legend either. I am a man. I'm not 40, but I am a man.
You are a man for sure. And you are the man behind pistolsfiring.com, Pistols Firing blog. So Marshall, thanks so much for rejoining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, I guess we could hop right into it here. I'm assuming if you're an Oklahoma State fan, you either watched the entire Oklahoma State Colorado game just because you were really curious if something random was going to happen out of pure interest or hatred of yourself, because I'm not sure which one it was. But Oklahoma State lost, of course, this weekend 52-0 and finished the season 0-9 in conference with 3 wins against, it was easy to remember them because there are only 3. But against South Dakota State, against Arkansas, and then against Tulsa. Marshall, how do you feel the season ended? Is there a high note we can kind of all be hopeful on here going forward into next season, or are we kind of maybe possibly in a doomsday scenario?
I think if you're looking for positivity, the Texas Tech game, that was at least fun. Milwaukee Smith looked good in that. Obviously did not look nearly as good in Boulder, but really nobody looked good at Boulder, so I don't want to, poo-poo on him too much. So yeah, I guess if you're looking for positivity, it'd be, Rodney Fields, Milwaukee Smith, David Kabongo's been really good. So a very young freshman class, and just the fact that the season finally came to an end, I think is it feels like a positive at this point, just kind of with how things were going.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I know that the question on everyone's mind here is going into coaching changes and what offseason stuff is going to happen here. So I guess without further ado, I just want to ask here, what do you think happens coaching wise, just overall?
Yeah, so we're recording this on a Monday night. So
Monday, December 2nd at like 9:15 p.m. So yeah. Something breaks in the meantime. I missed it, but
Yeah. So the fact that nothing has happened yet has been interesting, I think, within itself. I do expect there to be some sort of changes. I don't know what those changes are, but it just like a team doesn't go 0-9 with OSU's expectations and nothing happened. That's just kind of not how this works. So I don't know what they are going to be. You'd probably be looking at least one of the coordinators, I would think. But it's a little peculiar that nothing's happened yet whenever, some other programs are kind of getting the ball rolling. I don't know if there's a benefit to waiting past signing day. I don't really know if that's the case anymore, because signing day is not really all it was once cracked up to be. So I guess like maybe that's lingering. Maybe that's something that everybody's waiting on. I don't know. I do expect there to be changes, I guess, in conclusion, but like, why they haven't happened yet, I'm not sure. But I just think it'd be sort of very unusual, I guess you could say, if the season Oklahoma State had the way that it ended 52-0 in Boulder. If everything was just ran back next year, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I did really think it was interesting that basically Sunday people started tweeting, "Hey, Oklahoma State, what's going on? Our game was Friday, it wasn't yesterday. Why hasn't stuff happened yet?" I've never in my Now it's Gundy's been with the program 19 full seasons. So in those 19 seasons, I've never thought, wow, Gundy's a guy who makes a quick move or quick change here, except for on cutting some players after some stuff, of course, but not on, not on coaching changes whatsoever. Dunn's been with the program since 2019. And this is
the offensive coordinator. He's been with there since 2011. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That is a clear difference there. So 2019 offensive coordinator. And then, of course, before then, 2011, but 2019 OC, Ryan Nardo, just finished his second season. If you had to guess, which one of the two do you think gets kind of replaced and or moves in OC or DC?
Yeah.
Again, totally guessing. I am, want to make sure I preface it as that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, Dunn has been here longer. So hypothetically, he's had more time to prove himself. But at the same time, OSU's defense this year was just so bad. It was just like unbearably bad in many metrics. Only one defense was worse than them in the entire country. So while he hasn't had all the time to prove himself, that's obviously alarming that a defense can be that bad. They had injuries to Nick Martin, to Colin Oliver. That might have made the ceiling of this team higher, the ceiling of this defense higher, but I don't know that it should have made the floor as low as it's gotten. So those are like the two fighting ideas. It was, I don't know. I honestly have no idea. It's tough to say. At the end of the Colorado game, Gundy was maybe a little more upset with the offensive game plan for that particular game than he was the defensive game plan. Obviously, in any game you give up 52 points, defense isn't going well either. Kind of another variable in this is that they bring Brian Nardo in to run the 3-3-5. That's the whole point of bringing him here. But they've since kind of just converted back to a 4-down front. And so it's like, well, if you brought this guy from Gannon to play this particular defense, why isn't he playing it anymore? It's just so confusing. So I guess if I had to say one or the other is more likely, I don't know. I think at this point I'd say Nardo, just because that defense was so bad, and they're not even running the defense that they brought him in to run. So kind of what's the point of any of this? So I guess that's the way I'd lean, but I could see arguments obviously for both guys, just because like Oklahoma State is used to very good offenses. In some ways, I think that hurts Dunn that, Todd Monken, the greatest offensive coordinator alive right now, and then Dana Holgorsen, who, gets a head coaching job, gets another head coaching job, and is now already back with a coordinator with a high major program. So those are the guys that Casey Dunn gets compared to, but at the same time, the offense has just been not good enough on top of that. So yeah, I'm rambling at this point, but I guess I would lean Nardo in the hypothetical.
No, I mean, I appreciate though, because that's kind of what goes through, I think, a reasonable Oklahoma State fan's head, or at least my head here, if I'm calling myself reasonable, as okay, Dunn's had more time, but the development of every player, and also just kind of the ups and downs of all 5 seasons, just seem drastic. I mean, guy walks in, has Chuba Hubbard in 2020, and then that season's just weird, and just so many other things happen. The one thing that's been great though has been the personnel on the offensive side, at least in receiving. That's, of course, Dunn was the wide receivers coach from 2011, I believe, till 2019, and it still holds that kind of position and title in some way. On the other hand, though, I know Oklahoma State's, I think, 5th all time in yards, and Brennan Presley is gone after this year. His eligibility is up. Deshaun Stribling, and then possibly others. How do you think we look next year, kind of the offensive side? We know Bowman's gone. We know there's a 3-headed type of quarterback situation coming in as well too, and Ollie's gone. I mean, 20 out of 22 starters are returned for this past season, so I'm assuming we're losing a lot of those on both sides. Kind of, how do you think the offense looks next year, at least from what personnel we get back?
Yeah, so Dejon Stribling actually can come back. He was a redshirt junior, but you lose Rashad Owens, you lose Brennan Presley, you lose 5 offensive line starters. You lose Bowman. You probably lose Ollie. That hasn't been official yet, but he's probably going to the NFL. So yeah, I think the answer to kind of all that is probably the transfer portal. Opens December 9th. I think that here the past few years they've really been plugging holes through the transfer portal. Like getting Stribling was that was a big deal, but they had some semi-decent dudes at receiver. Obviously, Brendan Presley more than semi-decent, but getting him felt big. He felt like an instant impact type guy. But outside of him, they've been plugging in, a tackle here. They've been plugging in a tight end here, and it's sort of been scattered, the use of the portal. I think that this is going to have to be the first time where kind of a whole roster is overhauled with the portal. I think you're going to need a lot of offensive linemen. I think that's where they should start. I think that's where I would start. I'm not going to. I don't want to be a coach with all that's going on right now. But I think that's where everything starts. Gundy said that he expects all 3 of the quarterbacks, being Zane Flores, Garrett Rangel, and Milwaukee Smith, to be back. Is that reality? I don't know. I don't have any reason to not believe him at this point, but that's going to be an interesting thing within itself, I guess, because you've got Milwaukee, who's had one really good game, had one not really good game. You've had Garrett Rangel, who looked really good in a quarter and a half against BYU. Obviously played a little bit before that in the 3 quarterback rotation and even his freshman year some, but you don't have a ton of, known quantities on him. And then Zane Flores, who is maybe the most hyped up guy coming into the year in terms of those younger groups. Like, we haven't seen him at all yet. So, I think, your guess, anybody's guess is as good as mine when it comes to that situation. And if one ends up leaving, do you look at the portal? I don't know. I think everything's on the option for a team that went 0-9 last year. I think you just really got to, be the best that you can be at every position. If that's quarterback, okay, go look for one. If you think you've got a guy here that can kind of take over the reins and you need to put, NIL funding to your offensive line, to your receivers or something like that, then maybe that's the move. So I think a lot of production that's going to be on this team next year might not, be on this team right now. I do think some younger guys are going to step up. Rodney Fields, if Trent Hallen stays, kind of that's going to be a dynamic backfield. AJ Green, who was an Arkansas transfer, he got injured in fall camp. So, is he coming back? I don't know. Cameron Hurd was starting to get some run there at the end. Austin Kweki played a little bit. Isaiah Glass played a little bit on the offensive line. So you're going to have like those type of guys around, but I think a lot more production is going to be, coming from the portal at some point this offseason.
Gotcha. Well, on the defensive side of the ball here as well, too, do you think like it's so hard to replace a guy like Nick Martin and Colin Oliver, but granted, Colin Oliver, I wanted to put out there, was injured quite often coming down the stretch, and this season he played 1.5 games, if I have that right. I don't think he came back at any point.
He went out in the Arkansas game,
right?
And then
and I know he was rumored of he could come back or something, but we never really got the whole gist of that. And I feel like as the season wore on, it just was less and less like he was coming back for kind of what reason. Are both of those guys, do you think, gone to the NFL, and we kind of got to find the next man up here on the defensive side?
Yeah, so Colin Olbright's accepted an invite to the Reese's Senior Bowl. And while I'm not sure he's specifically come out and said that he's not, I think he can maybe go to that game and still come back. But I think that's a telltale sign that he's looking at his NFL future. Nick Martin, like Colin Oliver, went through senior night, I believe. He's a redshirt junior, so it is his, 4th year or 5th year, or whatever it is with the program. So that's understandable to an extent, but I think if you are Nick Martin, maybe you're going to the NFL. Like, what does this whole thing kind of look like next year with all that's, maybe going to change? We obviously talked defensive coordinator. The rest of the team kind of needs a whole revamp. So, I think that Nick Martin's maybe moving on just from him going through senior day. I kind of hope that's to the NFL. I think it'd be cool, if it, ended his career as a Cowboy just because of how great last season was. But I think he's going to do what's best for his future in the end. So I think you're going to need. You're going to need some pass rushers. They've got Jaleel Johnson, Deshaun Brown, who I think that they both think pretty high, or they think pretty highly of both. But I still think that was just such a weak point defensive line as a whole last year. Teams running on them all over the place. That you're going to need to figure that out. So I think I'd expect similar to the offense, them to go to the portal and just get as much competition in those position rooms as possible.
Gotcha. Well, do you think it from your experience, just kind of covering college football here, granted Oklahoma State wise, but just also just being a college football fan more or less and covering it more on media side than others I know, do you think a new DC or a new OC would be bringing in a lot of these guys here with them, or is that kind of not really the style and just happens every so often? Like, I know the Indiana guy, the Indiana head coach, right? He brought in a bunch of guys from JMU, James Madison, where he was coaching beforehand. Is that kind of a one-off, or is that kind of the norm here? And do you think it could happen with Oklahoma State?
I think it's definitely a possibility anytime a move happens. I don't, it's obviously going to be specific to the style. Even Brian Nardo, a year later, brings Obi Zigbo from Gannon. So I think there's always the potential for a little bit of that. I don't know that it's like what you should base a hire on necessarily. I think that OU got Ben Arbuckle today from Washington State. So everybody's wondering, I forget that quarterback's name, but they're wondering, is he coming with him to Norman? So I think that's always going to, be a storyline, but it doesn't always necessarily happen. Arizona's coach last year goes to coach at Washington. Fertitta and the
McMillan.
Yes,
Yeah.
the crazy good receiver.
Yeah.
People were wondering, are they going to go to Washington with him? They both stick in Arizona, and they kind of had a stinky season, unfortunately. But so yeah, I think there's the potential for that to happen in any move, but I'm not sure that that's what you should base, making your moves on.
Gotcha. Well, now that all the dust has proverbially settled on the season, and at least the last things have happened. There's no bowl game. It's just such a weird kind of like back-to-back seasons. I can't think of a weirder 2 seasons back-to-back for Oklahoma State. What do you think, just a fan here? I'm not really asking, it's kind of the reporting side. What do you think happens next year? Like, is there a way this team makes it to a bowl game? Is there a way this team makes it to 9 wins? Or is this just like, hey, we'll be happy with 3, kind of deal, however we can get it?
Yeah, it's so hard to say now because we don't really know who's going to be on the team at this point. But I think, anything is possible. Kenny Dillingham turned around a team that went 3-9 last year, I believe, and now they're in the Big 12 title game. So with the portal, anything is possible. But with that being said, it's and Gundy's I believe alluded to this a couple of times post Colorado, that they're going to have to rethink how they're looking at the portal and use it like a lot of successful programs are using it at this point. So I think as long as that happens, if they are able to use it to, I don't know what money Prime essentially brought to Colorado, but if you can maximize everything that Oklahoma State can in the portal, I think that they, could bounce back and make a bowl game. And, it's probably less likely, but turn around and compete for the Big 12 again. The Big 12 was so gettable for everybody seemingly this year, except for Oklahoma State, who didn't win a game. So, I think anything's on the table. It's just hard to say right now without knowing exactly who's going to be on the team.
So, since we haven't been big players in the portal so far, do you think are there other programs that are similar with us that have not been big players in the portal and the Big 12 that we can kind of go, okay, well, they're also not making big moves. It's not like we're that far behind, or are we? I get this innate feeling that we're really far behind in the portal, but that may just be a social media deal, and I'm trying to figure out if it is or not. What kind of truth is there?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of successful programs use the portal. Obviously, you look at Colorado and their turnaround. They're not the most successful, but even Ohio State, that's not the type of funds that Oklahoma State's going to be messing around with. But they go get downs and have this awesome defense that then loses whenever they were 20-point favorites at home. That wasn't the defense's fault, but So I think a lot of successful teams do. Obviously, I think Clemson's probably the biggest example with Dabo, maybe not buying into the portal as much. They're having a better year this year, but here lately they too been struggling by the standards that Dabo had set. I think it's possible to do it without diving headfirst into the portal, but I think it's much more difficult, and I just don't know that it's very efficient to kind of build up the way that Oklahoma State's been building up over Gundy's tenure.
Yeah, do you know, kind of like on portal number wise, are we behind the 8 ball where like we don't spend any money in the portal or like any money in NIL when it comes to bringing guys in transfer wise, or is it just something that kind of like I think like you're hinting at, as though Gundy just doesn't really just deal that much with the portal as a whole, or as much as other coaches, and instead just kind of, like you said earlier, fills gaps?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting this year because of all the guys that they're losing. So a lot of their NIL money that's not actually their NIL money, it's the Pokes with a Purpose NIL money, which is still at this point an entirely different thing. But I'm interested to see, because last year a lot of that money went to the players who were returning. You get the offensive line returning, you get Alan Bowman returning, you get Ollie Gordon returning. So that should hypothetically free some funds. As they didn't jump in very much last year because they were returning so much, maybe. So I'm interested to see now that there's not a lot of confirmed production on the roster. You were so veteran last year, you lose all that. So I'm interested to see with kind of how they divvy up, what they're focused on. Are they going to, go all in and, get a really good offensive line? I think that game is pretty interesting. I'm not sure that it exactly is going to play out like that. But yeah, I'm not sure what, like if they just didn't have the option because they didn't have the money, or if it was more a matter of they were spending all of their money on the guys who came back. So I'm kind of interested to see now that that's not the case. We should know going into this year kind of what they could do in the portal, hypothetically, because they don't have as many guys coming back.
Well, when it comes to coaching changes and possible new coordinators, there's kind of on the first question here. I think it's so easy to answer. I could ask a backup here as well too. There's no way that Gundy leaves whatsoever, or resigns or quits. I know he's had the quote here, but there's no way anything weird happens with him. But two, are there names out there for other coordinators that you've seen just from other universities looking at him, or maybe Oklahoma State could be interested, or any other names you might have heard of?
Yeah. So to answer the first one, I would expect Gundy to be back next year. I think, I think he's got to want to be able to, do the things that it takes to win in modern college football. And if he, doesn't want to do that, then I think that's acceptable at this point. There's been a lot of coaches here lately retire because, they don't really vibe with the way that college athletics are going. And I think that's fine. I think that's a fine thing to do. But if he does want to do it, I think, that it should be his to do, just because, 20 years at a place, you do have one bad season, and it was really bad. It was very bad. But I think if he is willing to adjust and to make, those adjustments going into, the transfer portal window, I think he should, get the chance to right this ship. What was the second question? Sorry, I started rambling.
No, you're totally good. It was just on any other names you possibly have heard of either other programs or kind of like, maybe that guy, we should go get him. Or, I mean, of course, Oklahoma State still has both the offensive coordinator and defense coordinator recording this, and nothing's been shouted out. So I don't want to, I'm just trying to say, are there other names out there we should be thinking, maybe Oklahoma State would be in the mix for him? Yeah.
So I've kept up with, just because with how the season is going, you'd expect, the potential of coordinator openings, but a guy I really like, and I don't know X's and O's in football, so I should not be, tasked with making a hire, but Brennan Marion at UNLV, he runs what's called the go-go offense. I'm hoping it's not a gimmick, but I think I just love it. I think I'm either madly in love with it, or it's a gimmick that's going to get figured out at some point. But it's a bunch of funky formations. They'll have a quarterback behind the center, then they'll have a running back to his left, then they'll have another running back to that guy's left, and it just kind of manipulates defenses and kind of gets athletes in space, which is, I think, what Oklahoma State fans have been wanting for a really long time. So yeah, that's who I really like. I think he's going to be on the board for a lot of places with openings. I was watching an interview a couple of days ago where they were like, this guy's going to be a head coach really soon. So I wonder if some smaller school wants him so bad that they give him a head coaching opportunities. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's the guy I'm most excited about. I've looked at some other names, but yeah, it would be tough for me to say, because I'm not going to act like I totally understand the ins and outs of what makes a coach a good coach.
Yeah, I of course do not either. When it comes to football, especially. So basketball maybe could talk about it a little bit, but with Steve Lutz, hey, we look like we're doing great with him so far. At least in our play style, I like a little more. But I'll get into basketball here maybe later on. Still on the football side of it, is there a couple of redeeming factors you're taking away from the season, and if so, what are they?
I think. I really like Rodney Fields. I think that's who I keep going back to. I think it's cool that Oklahoma State hit on him. Even going back into fall camp, whenever some offensive linemen would be talking, I think I remember Dalton Cooper just kind of like saying Rodney Fields, and like you could like see his eyebrows like go up, like, hey, this kid's pretty good. So, I think it's cool that that's translated to the field so far. David Kapongo is a really fun safety. Both of those guys obviously have a lot of growing to do. They're only true freshmen. But I think those two things are interesting. And I think, in some ways, if this leads to Oklahoma State figuring out the portal better than it does, then this could be something that in a way projects Oklahoma State forward. Because if they, just kind of kept winning 7-8 games, then maybe, something would have to change eventually. But maybe it wouldn't be as drastic as Oklahoma State finally saying, okay, look, we're going in to the portal. and we're going to do this portal thing like a lot of good programs do. So I think that's my hope. That it's obviously remains to be seen. The portal officially opens December 9th. So, hopefully it turns out like that. But yeah, I think in some ways this major setback of a season, could propel the program forward in ways that like maybe weren't possible without it happening.
That's got to be my hope. I'm taking away from this season as just hopefully there's some redeeming qualities on, okay, we at least know we need to have a wake-up call when it comes to the portal, when it comes to transfers, when it comes to NIL money, just X, Y, and Z, and we've got to do other things. Chad Weiberg, I think, has made some of the strongest coaching hires in other sports since he started. And, of course, Gundy was ruling the world, it seemed, when even Mike Holder was the AD. So for him to be ruling the world when Chad Weiberg's AD, I would definitely believe that. But then again, ruling the world, such a strong term and kind of a metaphor for it seems like it's Gundy and everyone else. This is the first season in a while where I've gone, maybe this will be a really good basketball season. Maybe this will be a really good baseball season because the football season was going so poorly at the end. So I really do hope this is a wake-up call to Gundy and to whoever else on the staff might need it. But do you see Oklahoma State adding in this kind of like general manager position? The reason why I'm asking this is because Andrew Luck, for example, just went back to Stanford. He's going to be their general manager of football. He's going to be like overseeing the whole entire deal. I don't see Oklahoma State having a guy above the head coach necessarily, but maybe a guy he works with. Do you think general managers are kind of the way to go, that other programs are implementing them? And it's something we should be thinking about here later on, and especially if we could bring back like Brandon Whedon or whoever our famous guy is to bring back and having that role?
Yeah, I don't know what Kenyatta Wright's title is. I think he's maybe more so with Pokes with a Purpose. No, he's the GM and director of football business at OSU. So yeah, Oklahoma State's got one former player, Kenyatta Wright. I think that it's such a new position sort of for everybody that I think everybody's sort of making kind of figuring out what it means for their specific program. Like, I don't know that, Andrew Luck being a GM is going to be the same as some, whoever's the GM at Ohio State and who's ever the GM at Coastal Carolina. I think, different job titles will kind of be a mix and mash of kind of dependent on where the place is, just because nobody really knows what they're doing yet. I think those will kind of be more defined as things roll along. But I think Kenyatta's been a net positive for everything. At least, he's been very good on social media. So I think that's I think he's done a good job in kind of helping the fan base relax a little bit whenever some stuff gets a little crazy. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, because I don't totally know what the job description is for those type of guys. And like I said, I think it changes so much. So I have no idea. I guess on what kind of the future of that anywhere is, much less Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I gotta say, my apologies for asking a dumb question here, because Kenyatta Wright is the director of football business, but under bio there's just no information available. So maybe I'm trying to give myself an excuse here for why I didn't know. But I mean, it's great that Oklahoma State's got somebody in that role already. More of what I'm trying to get at here is next season possibly going to be the worst season, or was this possibly the worst season? And I know it's so hard to tell with however many offseason changes, but when I talked with you and I think Dakota Gregory, who now is covering OU, so otherwise I have him on. But I know when I asked you guys earlier on this season, it was kind of heading downhill, but if the season hadn't ended yet, it was like, hey, next year could be really rough too. Just a heads up. Is that still a distinct? It's got to be a distinct possibility in your mind still right now, right? There just could be next year could be just as bad as this one.
I don't think it could be as bad as this one, because this one had expectations. This one, everybody thought, well, not everybody thought, but everybody around here, everybody in Oklahoma sort of thought Oklahoma State's going to contend for a Big 12 title and maybe make the college football playoff. So like, I don't have those expectations going into next year. So, if they finish 3-9 again, while it would, not be fun for anybody involved, it would, it at least wouldn't be, all of that returning production, Ollie Gordon in the backfield and winning 3 games. So yeah, I think surely this is rock bottom in a weird and twisted way. Even if next year is not very fun and Oklahoma State is not very good, I don't know that it gets as worse than having, all the pieces come back from a 10-4 team and then, not winning a conference game in a conference that nobody seemingly wanted to win.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part is that last year we played 2 more games. We won 1 more and lost 1 more than we could have. We just, called it the regular season. But this year, it just seems so odd because, like you said, the championship teams that are playing the championship have the same record as the third place team. And it just is so weird that we're seeing Arizona State and Iowa State play this weekend here for the Big 12 championship. Also, 2 teams with the exact same colors, but I'm sure Iowa State won't wear their colors. They'll wear black, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a kind of a gross uniform matchup. I think a yellow and red is fine, whenever you're facing a team that's not also yellow and red, but are the yellows going to be clashing or the reds going to be clashing? I think that has the opportunity to be a gross uniform matchup.
It just should be the hot dog matchup.
Yeah.
You've got just ketchup and mustard, and that's it, and that's all you got to choose from. It's got to be the least 2 favorite colors that I have that anyone could put on a jersey together, but that's mainly because red's in there. Mm-hmm. I also want to ask you about this football season in regards to kind of Gundy as a whole. You asked him some really good questions. You asked him about, hey, why is Nardo not running a 3-3-5 defense, as you referenced earlier. You saw the whole cooler deal where, you got put on News 9 for a little bit, or one of the news TV stations where you're kind of looking around trying to go, why is Gundy messing with a cooler? Nice chest. Yeah, it's loud. But there were so many different times throughout this season and kind of through the years past since you've been covering Gundy. Where does the season stack up? Is this one more of like kind of the weirder ones Gundy's just been to the media, or is this kind of more of a normal one when it matches up to the media versus how the season's going? What do you think about his kind of temper right now and how he treats the media?
Yeah, I think losing just sucks. So I think that's, I think whenever losing happens, it's not fun for him. It's not fun for the players. It's not, the media is not really having much fun writing about it either. I think I wrote a Brennan Presley type story as my, I've got like one spot every week where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something different with this story. And I think I just did Brennan Presley like 3 weeks in a row because nothing else fun was happening on the team. So yeah, I think he didn't totally blow up on anybody, which I think is a net positive. So yeah, I think, it hasn't been peaches and rainbows, but the season hasn't been peaches and rainbows. I just think it's kind of a matter of losing sucks, winning is more fun. And, whenever he's winning, he's having more fun. I think that's a fair place to be, sort of.
Yeah, I got to agree with that one for sure. I feel like this season there were more quotes maybe that came out from Gundy that were just more quotable things where they're calling, you had the guy who transferred in from Gannon's name flawlessly earlier, but Obi.
Yeah, Ezigbo. Yeah.
Ezigbo, thank you. Calling him a cheap transfer because he's transferring from a D2 into a D1. Granted, that's why he's saying it that way. He also calls the fans at one point, the guys who were commenting on his time at Oklahoma State and his legacy and just how he's coaching and really just commenting on him as a whole and the football program are too cheap to, pay their bills or whatever, or don't have enough money, too poor to pay their bills. And then also he's had some rather a kind of uplifting but awesome moments too. I also want to paint the full picture of doing his radio show this year at a senior center so that they could all see him. And I don't think that was really publicized for a little bit. Maybe it was at some point on purpose or not, but I think it was kind of found out about that, and it wasn't really on the forefront front burner for Oklahoma State pushing that out there. And of course, I know he's frequently known as kind of a Stillwater celebrity of sorts, but there's also been some weird one former player tweeting out some weird stuff about Gundy on social media and just some other stuff too. How much longer do you think Gundy is going to keep coaching here with all these kind of weird quotes and stuff like that coming out? If you had to guess, 5-10 years. I mean, I know he's not 40 anymore, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at as well. And he's one of the longest tenured coaches in football.
Yeah, it's tough to say because I feel like there was a time, like it's been 6-7 years ago at this point, where Gundy kind of alluded to the fact that he would retire early. But then after maybe 21. He's talking about how he's having the most fun that he's ever had. So that would, lead everybody to believe that he wants to continue doing this. And whenever he got asked the retirement question, post whatever game that was, Texas Tech. I don't even remember. But whenever he got asked that, He said that he's more invested now than he's ever been. So I think it's going to come as a surprise whenever it happens. Whenever he doesn't want to be the coach here anymore, I think everybody's just going to be surprised. But at the same time, he's alluded in the past to saying it might be early, and then here lately, maybe he's talking about it not being so soon. So neither way would be totally surprising, but I think whenever it happens, everybody's going to be taken crazy aback by it.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. A guy who's been around for 19 years, and one would assume definitely a full 20 next year. It's going to be weird when he leaves, and weird to know an Oklahoma State coach on the sideline that's not him. But I know two guys that are definitely changing that have been mainstays of the program the last 2 years, which is Ollie Gordon. I had to look it up. 12th leading rusher all time in Oklahoma State history. So even though he only had really 2 full seasons under his belt, he still was pretty darn productive in those 2 full years. And then, of course, Alan Bowman. How do you think each of them will be remembered? And I want to follow it up with another couple players here in a second, too.
Yeah, I think Ollie, is obviously, I think everybody, I don't know that anybody totally blamed this season on Ollie for how it went. Obviously, the program's first Doak Walker winner. And it seems like he's got all the, gifts and talents and ability to play in the NFL. So I think he'll be remembered fondly. Bowman, I'm so glad that the fan base cheered whenever Bowman's name got announced for senior day. I was worried. My palms were literally sweating in the press box. Just because did he have a good year? No, obviously. But he leads OSU to that magical 2023 season. He wins the final Bedlam game. And this year, I'm sure he would have loved to play better, just like, the OSU fans watching would have loved for him to play better. At the same time, he didn't have much of a run game to kind of, help him this year. So, he didn't play well, but I think Oklahoma State fans should still, cheer for the guy that did all the right things, said all the right things. It just didn't work out on the field. And, that's on him to an extent, but at the same time, I feel bad for, saying that this guy shouldn't be anything whenever he did all that he could, seemingly.
Well, there's one other guy that I was waiting to ask you about just singularly, and that's Brandon Presley, because he in my mind is one of the guys that I wish Oklahoma State, I wish we had been the first team to offer him a scholarship, a full ride. I know we were not. I know his kind of recruiting history was a little bit lengthy with Oklahoma State. And of course, his brother was at Oklahoma State for a year and then transfers to Tulsa. It seems like the youngest brother, Braden, I think it is, Presley, is now committed to Oklahoma State, or at least being recruited.
Yeah, he's got an offer, but he's also got an OSU offer recently.
Okay.
I think everybody's getting it. I think he's a 26, so I think not this class, but the next one.
So he would have a gap year in Presley's, it sounds like. But how will you remember Brendan Presley at Oklahoma State? I mean, played in Fiesta Bowl, beat OU twice in Bedlam, Big 12 championship. He went to twice. I mean, how do you remember Presley?
Yeah, I think he's one of my all-time favorite players that I've covered, kind of regardless of sport. He was just, his play style was so much fun, just watching him change directions and like jitterbug his way down a field was just kind of so much fun to watch. And then his interviews were always pretty electric. He's talking about candy that he likes to eat, and then how Nerds clusters are the best candy. And whenever PlayStation 5s came out and everybody was having trouble getting them, he used part of his media availability to tell his parents that he wanted a PlayStation 5. And then they made the Fiesta Bowl and he got one for free, so that worked out perfectly. But then so there's that side, the fun side to what's Brennan got going on, to after these losses they kept putting Brennan in front of us because they knew that he could speak well. And he just kept saying everything that you would want a guy to say that's in that position. Obviously, everybody wanted the team to play better, but the way that he was handling it, I think just kind of said a lot about him as a person as well. So yeah, I think he's on that. Is he I hope that he plays well in the NFL. I hope that he gets a shot at the NFL. But similar, and I guess Malcolm Rodriguez is getting a shot, but I think Barry Trammell asked a question earlier this year, and he's sort of on that all Gundy Cowboy type guy where maybe it's not, the most explosive athlete. Well, Brennan is a crazy athlete, but not the most highly recruited guy, that turns into a really good college player at Oklahoma State. And I think Brennan's kind of the antithesis of that, being the program's all-time leader in receptions, and making all the big catches and the kick return. So yeah, I think he should go down as I think he is going to go down as like a lot of people's favorite OSU player, maybe ever.
That answer makes me want to follow with this one. Of the guys on Oklahoma State's roster this year, who do you think is most likely to be put in the Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor?
Oh, the ring,
of Oklahoma State, yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting because if Ollie goes to the NFL and has a crazy good NFL career, that maybe makes him even more likely. And not to say that his accomplishments at Oklahoma State weren't aplenty, but winning a Doak Walker, and if he can go on to be a dude in the NFL. And Colin Oliver, I think, is in a similar spot to where if he goes to the NFL and turns into this crazy good pass rusher, I think that could be him. I'd want to say Brendan Presley, but I think I guess I don't see why not. He's the program's all-time leader in reception, so why not put 80 up there? So I think those are three candidates. The most likely of those, I guess I would lean Ollie just because he seems kind of the most NFL ready. But yeah, if I had my pick, I think I'd put Brendan up there, but maybe all three of those guys go up there at some point. I don't know.
It would be awesome to see all three. It'd be awesome to see Bowman up there too, although I really only think Bowman at this point might make it up there as a coach just because we got to put Brandon Whedon up there first before I start talking about the quarterback, who got it to a Big 12 championship game in one season, next season. Had much different tale to tell. Looking in a little bit here to the basketball season so far, Grant, I know it's tipped off here and kind of the last 20 minutes or so of the podcast. I want to ask you about basketball. How do you think Steve Lutz is doing here so far? I know they just played in the Charleston Classic and I think lost one, won one, lost another one if I have that right. And Big 12 play starts this month too, which seems crazy.
Yeah, I think it's been fun to watch. The 81 free throw game that they had against Florida Atlantic to start the Charleston Classic, that was not fun to watch. I don't think that was fun to watch even for Florida Atlantic fans whenever their team won the game. So that was not fun to watch. But I think the outside of that, it's been fun. Very in-your-face defense that causes a lot of steals. But if they get caught out of position at some point, it's probably going to end in an easy bucket. Teams are shooting pretty efficiently against Oklahoma State, but teams are also turning the ball over a ton against Oklahoma State. And that's sort of just fun to watch. And then obviously offensively, whenever you get in those steals, you're pushing the pace. So yeah, I think it's been fun to watch. I think it's been a positive step for the program. I think that the refresh was needed to a certain extent. I still don't know how good exactly they're going to be this year. And I think a lot of, whenever they get in the Big 12, this thing could start to look ugly just because the Big 12 is ridiculous. So I'm trying not to get too ahead of my skis, but I think so far it's at least been enjoyable to watch outside of an 81 free throw attempt game in Charleston.
Yeah, that FAU game, I just cannot believe that it kept going. I mean, that was the main thing. It stopped so many times. 81 free throws seems bizarre when you say it, but it's even weirder to watch because 81 just becomes a number we can just repeat over and over. And at some point, it's like, all right, whatever, it was 81. But yeah, watching 81 free throws in a game is a bit odd. Who's your favorite player though so far on the team?
Yeah, I think Chi Avery has been fun because he's like 6'8" and can do a lot of different things. He's been a lot of fun. I really liked watching Khalil Brantley just because he's a little undersized, but whenever he's moving to the basket, it's just kind of a fun. He's a fun watch. He's good at passing. He's good at ball handling. And then when push comes to shove, he's able to score, sometimes in the paint despite his size. So I think he's been super fun to watch. I think that Oklahoma State fans don't give Bryce Thompson enough credit. I think it's a cool story that this, 5-star kid from Booker T. Washington is playing in Oklahoma State for 4 years. I think maybe OSU fans, he didn't turn into the one and done NBA draft pick, but he scored a lot of points in an Oklahoma State uniform. In a sport where guys are constantly in and leaving, to have a hometown kid stick around and be a consistent, player on a team for 4 years is, I think, underappreciated from Oklahoma State fans. So yeah, I'd say those guys. Abu Usman, the center, he's been good. He hasn't played a ton of other big centers, so I'm excited to see how he stacks up to some of the guys in the Big 12. But yeah, I think those are the four guys that I'd single out at this point.
Yeah, you gonna venture up to Tulsa to go see the game Wednesday night?
I am. I will be there Wednesday.
I'm guessing probably not Seton Hall though on Sunday though. That might be
Yeah, it will not be.
yeah.
It will not be. Just keep driving east, I guess.
Yeah, I can't believe though that Bedlam still gets to happen this year in basketball. At least we got that on the 14th down in Oklahoma City or down here. It seems so odd that basically the basketball team is completely new. I mean, there's 3 guys returning from last year. If I have it right, it's Dow, Keller, and Thompson.
Yeah.
And who do you think could be like the guy everyone's just gonna love for Oklahoma State wise here this year? Is it a guy? Is it one of those guys returning? Is it Thompson, the hometown kid who sticks around, or is everyone going to fall in love with somebody else?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of Chi fans just because of like whenever he starts to heat up, he really gets rolling. He can shoot the 3, 6'8". He's nimble despite being as tall as he is. So I think he's going to turn into a lot of people's favorite player. I think the way Arturo Dean plays defense, he led the nation in steals last year. I think his kind of hard-nosed attitude towards things jibes with Oklahoma State fans, especially basketball fans. A lot of times at an OSU game, the arena is at its loudest whenever somebody's diving on the floor and causes play going back the other way. So I think Arturo Dean's got a lot of that in him. And then I think Thompson's got as many maybe haters as Thompson has. I think he's got a lot of supporters for being that hometown kid. So maybe those 3 guys will be among the fans' favorites.
Yeah, I had to look it up here. Chi-Chi's 6'8". I did not realize we had that tall of a sharpshooter on the court here. Lindy Waters was like 6'6", right? And he was the last guy I remember. Dizog was after him, I think, a little bit, or
they were the same class.
They're kind of the same. It just seems bizarre. Of course, seeing Lindy Waters play NBA basketball for the Warriors just is also just insane to see. But shout out to him as well too. Of course, shout out to the Oklahoma State guys in the league. I'll just random shout out to Marcus Smart there as well for everyone interested. Back to football here for a second. Which guy do you think gets drafted first from this last year's team? I mean, that's kind of more of the fun questions here as we end this out. Is it and then I want to ask, of course, if who you think gets drafted, period, or maybe who you think doesn't get drafted, who every Oklahoma State fan thinks should.
Yeah, I think Ollie will probably be the guy, just because he's kind of got the pedigree at this point. I think a lot of people thought he's going to be a high pick for a while now, but I could see I don't know how healthy Nick Martin is going to be by the time pro day stuff comes around, but I think he's going to run a very fast 40 that's going to raise some eyebrows, and then you're going to see all of his tackling production, and then he'll kind of be his size as to whether teams think that they can take a risk like that. And somewhat similar to Colin Oliver. Colin's got the stats to back up how good he's been, but I think teams are going to wonder: is he a defensive end? Is he an outside linebacker? Is he somewhere in the between? Guys that will get. I think it's going to be tough, and Gundy said this as well. I think it's going to be tough whenever Brendan Presley gets in front of people for them to not like him. It only takes one team to want to draft a guy to make him a draft pick, but if not, he's going to have an opportunity as a undrafted free agent to step in. And I think once he gets in a camp and teams kind of see what he's all about and see what he's able to do, I think it's going to be hard for teams to turn him away. I also think Dejon Stribling, I don't know if he's going to go to the NFL, but if that's something that he wanted to pursue, I think he is an NFL player at some point. I don't know if he needs another year in college to kind of prove that to other teams. But I think he's a really good route runner, and he's got, nice size as well. So I think he can impress some people. Let's see. Is there anybody? Corey Black, I think, has got a shot. He started at corner basically, I think, for like 3 years. The team says that he's the fastest guy on the team, so that'll surely help him as well. So I think that those are some guys. I'm trying to think if anything else. Maybe like a Colin Clay gets a camp invite. Cody Walterside's got some size. Maybe he gets a camp invite. I think those are, there's so many seniors. There's so many guys that will be going through OSU's pro day and all the things like that. Like I said, it only takes one team to be super interested in you, and all of a sudden you're drafted. Yeah,
I guess the one guy's name who I really mentioned, I think maybe once, and you mentioned a couple times, is Rashad Owens, and I really feel like as Oklahoma State fans, as time passes, he'll be the guy who's like the unsung hero from this team. Probably not this year, just because I don't think anyone's going to remember this year fondly, but last year at least, and changing positions, tight end, to be wide receiver and just, or wide receiver to tight end, then back to wide receiver and all types of stuff too. I really hope he gets drafted, but I could also see him doing kind of the Leon Johnson thing where he makes a camp and then just ends up not making, kind of maybe he's relegated to the practice squad during the season or doesn't make that and then has to do some other stuff. I just really feel like that guy was just a true team player and stuff as well too. Is there a guy next year in football that you're like, hey, you know what? He's may not be the quarterback or Rodney Fields or Trent Haaland that you're like, hey, you know what? This is the guy I'm hopeful is going to make a big change or a big difference here for next year football state. Granted, let's say for sure he sticks with the team that doesn't change teams.
Yeah, I really like Talon Shetron's ability. He's got speed. He keeps getting hurt. That's obviously not a good thing, but in the early parts of this year, with as deep as everybody seemingly thought Oklahoma State was at receiver with Stribling, Owens, and Presley, he was kind of carving out a role for himself. So he was a highly touted recruit. He was committed to Oklahoma before flipping to Oklahoma State. So that's kind of like the level of recruit that he is. And then his speed, his size, I think he's primed for a big jump. He's just hopefully going to stay healthy. I think it was like a wrist or a thumb or something this time. And yeah, it just seems like it's been, as soon as he's gotten a little bit of momentum going, an injury will shut it down. So if he could stay healthy, I think he's in for a big next season.
Wonderful. Well, very last question here, I promise, is Big 12 championships this weekend here. Arizona State versus Iowa State. Weirdly enough, it's in Arlington, and that's not close to either team whatsoever, as we're used to seeing a team from Oklahoma or Texas play in it for so many years. But who you got? Just true toss-up here. I'm not really going to harp on you if you get it wrong whatsoever.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning Arizona State just because they've kind of got that momentum right now. It just feels like they keep rolling. I think their top receiver got hurt, I think, in this last game. I don't know what his status is moving forward. But Cam Scatabo is kind of just like a bully playing running back. He gives off like wrestler vibes in like the best way possible. Where wrestlers are ultra competitive and like maybe a little crazy. I think Cam Scatabo's got some of that in him. So yeah, I think that's who I think. I think as a Big 12 truther, would love for Iowa State to win and maybe one of these newcomer teams not win the Big 12 instantly. But as a Big 12 truther, Texas won the Big 12 on its way out. So, it just rains and pours. So, yeah, I think my gut is saying Arizona State in Cam Scatabo, just because it just feels like they've got so much momentum rolling into this game.
Well, and as we know here, I mean, you can't forget Texas made it immediately to the SEC championship game, and they were a Big 12 team last year. So clearly Big 12 just has got to be just as good as the SEC then. And so I could think we should have been the SEC championship this year too at 3-9.
It's interesting because I think a Pac-12 team, Oregon, could win the Big 10. A Pac-12 team, Arizona State, could win the Big 12. A Big 12 team could win the SEC. SMU, an American team, could win the ACC. So
that completes the whole cycle of it. Yeah.
So I don't know that conferences mean anything at this point.
Yeah, I don't think they mean anything whatsoever. I myself here have Arizona State just because if the team beats us, I want them to win it. But also here, I just have a long-standing hatred of Iowa State. Iowa State fan broke one of my dad's ribs by shoving him to a railing when we went to a game. Ooh. And I will say at the game, my dad didn't think he broke a rib, but I know he listens to the podcast completely. So shout out there, Dad. And also, of course, here too, Iowa State. This is their first season getting to 10 wins, which to me, I want to just tell every Oklahoma State fan that as like a stat. And maybe I should live the podcast off with that. But like Iowa State and their story history and however many years they've been playing college football has gotten to 10 wins once in their entire program, and it's this year. Whereas Oklahoma State fans, I think we went, last year was cool. We went 10-4, but we went 10-4. We didn't win the Big 12 championship. It was a really great season because the expectations were low. And this season's like a season from hell because, we didn't win a conference game, which is true. The expectations are correct there. But I know as someone else who has also followed Oklahoma State for an incredibly long time, probably since birth. I mean, that's how I know I was. Mm-hmm. It brings me a little sadness to see people just going, hey, Gundy's got to go, Dunn's got to go, Nardo's got to go, just rebuild the whole thing. And while I do think some of that's warranted because these guys have had a couple of years, and one's had several years, and one's had a couple, and of course Gundy's been around a while, and I know change has to be made because I want change to be made. I am not saying, hey, let's just ride it out next season, turn it back over, roll it back. But I do want to also give like context of could be way different. We could have had the hottest coach in the entire world coaching our team, and he could have left years ago in Matt Campbell, and instead he stayed, and wow, we got to 10 wins. That could be, I'm not saying Ryan was State fans, but I'm also saying, hey, let's just look around and just kind of understand where we're at for a minute, because could be worse from historical perspective. Of course, we all are upset this much, I think, as fans, because we want to be better. So anyways, that's my 2 cents here and my soapbox to be on.
I think it's interesting because it's okay to have expectations. I think at some points, that Gundy has built that, and now he's got to feed it. But I think I saw, maybe it's the Charlotte coach, a video of the Charlotte coach today, talking about his offensive coordinator maybe gotten some Twitter feud with a fan. And the guy was like, the Charlotte coach, the head coach was like, the day that the fans stop caring, that's a bad day. So yeah, it's tough to say because obviously, nobody's questioning what Mike Gundy has meant to Oklahoma State football over his time as a player and as a coach. But yeah, and he's built this monster, and now he's got to feed it. So it's kind of like as a lot of things are, you've got to be all the way one way or all the way the other way nowadays, especially on Twitter and stuff like that. So it's I don't know, it's more there's more gray areas than that. But yeah, it's tough. I think it's okay to have expectations as an Oklahoma State fan, but this year has definitely brought back the, hey, I like the way things used to be.
Yeah, and I only trust Oklahoma State as an institution going forward too, because like you said, it's a program that expects more, expects better, but also Chad Weiberg has done everything in my mind to improve Oklahoma State as a whole. I don't think he's made a wrong decision yet in any way, shape, or form. Steve Lutz is too new. David Taylor is way too new. I'd say,
JC Hoyt.
JC Hoyt. Yeah, I wanted to say Holt so badly, but JC Hoyt. Only good things.
Yes, yeah, going in the right direction there.
Yeah, equestrian wins the Big 12. It seems like once every 2 years, if not every year. Cross country is killing it. Tennis is killing it. I don't know what bad decision the guy's made, so I only have trust in Oklahoma State going forward with the football team and with every change being made. And I hope this year gives more Weiberg only more leverage too, to be able to kind of push for that stuff. If all the behind the scenes things that are going through my head are actually true, of it's tough to be an athletic director and come into a coach who's been there for so many years, just the face of the program, and start telling him what to do when you're a guy who is not as face of the program as Gundy is. If all that background information, I think, is true and is real and is going through these guys' heads, it's a far bridge to jump to begin there and to get there too. But not that these two guys could see eye to eye, have a better communication efforts with each other. But if all that is true, I just think this only is a season that we struggle to look back on and go, yeah, you know what? It's great that we're going to 2 Big 12 championships back-to-back in 27-28, because, man, that 2024 season was really the wake-up call Gundy needed to go in the portal or to do whatever. And making all this up, but I'm so annoyed with all like the, hey, this sucks, like, woe is us, college football is horrible, we didn't win anything, what are you going to do next? Fire someone today, fire someone tomorrow, fire someone next week. Get someone in the portal. Oh, Bowman was never good, or all this type of stuff. Just because this is fun. I get to talk about college football with my friend here and get to broadcast it. This is like, sports is fun. And if it stops being fun, then that's when I'm not on Twitter for a day or not on Instagram for a day or whatever. That's just kind of it. When I'm not having fun with it, I don't engage with it. And I haven't had more fun doing stuff and talking about Oklahoma State in quite some time. Granted, I would really wish the season had gone differently, of course, but that being said, it's great to stop basketball. We'll play Tulsa Wednesday. We're recording some Monday night, so it's then get a great baseball season here next coming up in the spring as well too. And I think easily the best baseball stadium in college baseball by far and away.
Yeah, and I think one, that's a good point about Weiberg, that it seemingly has not missed yet. So I think it's okay to trust the process there. And then two, Saturday was like so much fun for me because I was able to watch college football and not have to deal with everything going wrong for Oklahoma State. I think that Saturday I was a little stressed the whole time because I was like wondering if anybody's going to get fired or not. Just watching the football, it was kind of a nice refresher of like, hey, this is a good time. Like it is so much fun watching these games. So I think that's all good perspective.
Thanks. Yeah. And you know what? We're not as sore losers or sore winners as Michigan and Ohio State are. That's what I know for sure here. Because, I didn't want to make a kind of a pun on that because I don't think either side made it out looking like they're smelling like roses. I guess I'll say it that way. I think both sides got some egg on their face. And we're not as sore losers as Ohio State fans or sore winners as Michigan fans, I guess. So, with all being said, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Marshall Scott here. I'm going to say myth a little bit just until we get you better webcam set up because you're a little bit mythical right
I do
now.
look a little ghosty.
But follow him at Marshall Scott OK on X, Twitter, Blue Sky maybe too. I don't know.
I haven't made that jump yet.
Threads.
I'm scared of change.
Yeah, I think we all have a Threads account because we have Instagram. But if you're not already, follow out the CGA Tour on Twitter, Instagram, and everywhere you listen to podcasts, and subscribe here below on YouTube about the podcast and share with a friend. Thanks so much for everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you guys again soon.